Imagine the atmosphere. The studio lights of The Tonight Show began to dim. Blue beams of light danced on the stage, and amid the laughter of the impatient audience, there was a characteristic voice that only one person had. "Hey, hey, hey! We've got BTS in the house tonight!" Yes, it was Jimmy Fallon, the most spontaneous host, the most witty, but also the most honest in judging his guests. And that night, it wasn't just another episode. Because behind the jokes and laughter, Jimmy turned out to keep a small note that would make fans around the world wide open. The note contains an unexpected ranking of BTS members, from the Friendliest to the Coldest. Sounds trivial, right? But for fans who have followed BTS since the beginning, a list like this isn't just about who smiles a lot or who is quieter. It's about character, honesty, and the way each member deals with the world offstage. Jimmy Fallon, with his trademark relaxed and observant style, has met them several times, not just in one interview session, but in various interactive segments that really reveal the personal side of the 7 BTS members. From a big laugh while playing silly games in the studio, to an in-depth chat about their journey in the global music world. And of all those moments, Jimmy strung together his observations into a list that quietly became a legend among NBC's crew and staff. But before we get into the ratings, let's take a breath for a moment and imagine what was the atmosphere really like behind the scenes when BTS came to Jimmy Fallon's show. No camera lights, no script, no background music, just 7 men with contrasting personalities, and a host who's adept at reading gesture, intonation, and honesty in every word. There, J-Hope is always the center of energy, breaking the ice with his characteristic loud laugh. Jin throws a dad joke that makes everyone laugh, but with a look that occasionally seems deeper than it seems. RM speaks with authority, but also cautiously, like a leader who does not want to dominate the space. While Jimin, with his soft smile but sharp gaze, always makes the atmosphere warm and full of mystery. Then there's V, the mysterious one who can change the atmosphere with just one expression. Sometimes he seems relaxed, sometimes he seems to think about something that no one knows. Jungkook, the maknae, often appears calm, but there is distance in his gaze, not because he is arrogant, but because he selectively opens himself up to the public. And finally, Suga, who is always calm, but has an aura that makes everyone respect automatically. He rarely spoke for a long time, but once he spoke, everyone stopped and listened. Jimmy, with years of experience dealing with world stars from various backgrounds, could immediately read the difference. And as always, he does not judge it from the stage, but from the small moments that often escape the cameras. From the way they wait their turn, stare at the staff, greet the audience, or simply laugh at themselves. It knows which ones are genuinely friendly without pretending, which ones are polite but cautious, and which ones keep an emotional distance for deeper reasons. And when he finally made the from friendliest to coldest list, not in a negative sense but more to the level of warmth he felt personally, the result was really interesting. Some may agree, some may not. But for sure, this list opens up a big conversation among fans. It turns out that behind their familiarity on stage, there is a much more complex and human social dynamic. Because in the end, BTS isn't just a supergroup with perfect vocal harmony. They're also 7 individuals with different ways of expressing love, friendship, and honesty. So tonight, let's take a look at them one by one. Who Jimmy Fallon thinks is the hottest and who is the most unapproachable, at least in the eyes of a host who has shared their laughs, games, and candid moments with them. Get ready, because this list will make you see BTS from a side you've never imagined before. And maybe also make you wonder, if you were in Jimmy's shoes, who would feel the most friendly to you? Number 7. J-Hope, the sunshine everyone needs. If you've ever watched BTS perform on any show, especially on The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon, you know who was the first to make the atmosphere melt before Jimmy even had a chance to say one opening line. Yup, J-Hope. From the way he came on stage with a light and expressive step to his trademark laugh that could echo throughout the studio, J-Hope wasn't just friendly. She is a tangible manifestation of positive energy that is contagious to anyone around her. Jimmy Fallon once said behind the scenes, "He's the kind of person who makes you feel like you've known him for years, even if it's your first time meeting him." And that's what makes J-Hope 7th place, not because he's less friendly, but because from Jimmy's perspective, J-Hope is too bright, too consistent an energy, to the point that it can no longer be compared to the normal warmth scale. It is like a ray of sunshine that always shines equally brightly, no matter who is standing in front of it. There's a sense of awe as well as a small distance there, not because J-Hope is cold, but because his personality feels so trained to give unconditional warmth, like a true entertainer who has mastered the stage, the atmosphere, and the feelings of others with an almost automatic instinct. During the filming of The Tonight Show, J-Hope was the first to arrive and the last to leave the room. He greeted the staff one by one, complimented the lighting, joked with the cameraman, and even managed to calm a young crew who was nervous because the mic equipment had problems. Jimmy, who was already used to big stars coming in with sky-high egos, was amazed. He treats everyone like they're part of the team, not just background staff, he said in an internal interview. But at the same time, he also realized something. J-Hope almost never stops smiling. Even when the camera is off, even when they take a long break in the waiting room, as if J-Hope refuses to show her fatigue. From the side of social psychology, people like J-Hope are often called empath performers. A person who has a high sensitivity to the surrounding atmosphere, so naturally always tries to maintain positive energy in public spaces. But on the other hand, this type can also be very good at hiding stress. And Jimmy, who often read the expressions of his guests, caught the signal. He said, "There's something about him. It's like he carries the happiness for everyone." The sentence is simple, but deep, because behind that warmth there is a great responsibility to keep the atmosphere pleasant, even if the heart may not always be so. Many fans are also aware of it. In various behind-the-scenes clips, J-Hope is often seen making sure all BTS members feel comfortable. As Jungkook gets nervous ahead of the performance, J-Hope stands beside him, holds his shoulder, and pats him with a smile. When V is silent for too long, he breaks the mood with a random joke that makes everyone laugh. And when Jin makes Dad an unfunny joke, J-Hope laughs the loudest, not because it's funny, but because she knows laughter is important to the group's mood. Jimmy, who really appreciates the chemistry between you, sees that as something out of the ordinary. He once told his producer that J-Hope was like the glue that held the group together in front of the public. He is not a formal leader, but in social interaction, he is the social center. However, he also noted something interesting. J-Hope seemed a little more awake than the others when the conversation began to touch on personal matters. Not that he's dishonest, but he knows his limits. Jimmy says, he's open, but controlled. You can tell he's used to protecting the mood. And maybe that's where J-Hope's uniqueness lies. He's the friendliest performer, but not the most transparent person. He understands that in the world of global entertainment, friendliness is a universal language that keeps relationships warm, even when the heart is not all right. He is not one to share sadness in front of the camera, because for J-Hope, his job is to be a mirror of light, not a burden on the atmosphere. Even when he performed solo in the Jack in the Box era, Jimmy had alluded to how different his aura on the solo stage was than on variety shows. That's the moment I realized. He's not just happy, he's devastated. Jimmy laughs. There's a depth that people rarely notice, because J-Hope is too good at covering it up with laughter. Number 6. Jin, the playful gentleman with hidden walls. If there's one thing that instantly steals Jimmy Fallon's attention every time BTS comes to his studio, it's how Jin can master the atmosphere with just his presence. Not because he was the noisiest, not because he was the chattiest, but because there was an aura of a combination of gentleman, comedian, and someone who knew when to speak and when to be silent. In Jimmy's eyes, Jin is the playful gentleman, someone who seems open and relaxed, but actually has a very solid wall around him. On their first meeting on The Tonight Show, Jimmy commented, "He's like that cool senior in school, always smiling, always polite, but you can't tell what he's really thinking." And the comment turned out to be not without reason. Every time BTS performs on his show, Jin always appears perfect. His face is always calm, his smile is sincere, and his humor timing is almost perfect. But in between those laughs, there were little moments that didn't escape Jimmy's radar. For example, when all the members laugh out loud at a silly joke, Jin can often be seen staring at them for a while before laughing along like someone who makes sure everyone is happy first, then lets himself get carried away. Jin is known by the nickname Worldwide Handsome, but behind that perfect face, he has a unique habit, making laughter as a shield. Jimmy noticed it when they were rehearsing the Subway Olympics segment. When a crew member once praised Jin for always being friendly and cheerful, Jin replied jokingly, "I'm always funny because serious face doesn't work for me." Everyone laughed, but Jimmy caught something behind that line, a little honesty wrapped in humor. He understands that people like Jin use cheerfulness not only to entertain others, but also to keep a safe distance from questions that are too personal. During the interview, Jin rarely becomes the center of the conversation. He prefers to chime in with short comments that are funny but meaningful. When Jimmy asked about BTS struggles during his trainee days, Jin said, "I think we all had hard times, but when you have 6 brothers, it feels less heavy." The sentence was simple, but it was pronounced with a slightly more serious expression than usual. Jimmy admitted that after filming, he had a chance to talk to his team and said, "That guy, he hides a lot behind his smile." In the entertainment world, many celebrities learn how to maintain a friendly and approachable image, but not all can do it in a manner as elegant as Genie. It does not impose familiarity, but still makes everyone feel respected. Jimmy once said, "He greets you like you're someone important, even if he's the biggest star in the room." That attitude made many of the NBC crew remember it with admiration, because not all famous guests have such humility. However, Jimmy also observed something else deeper. After several shootings, Jimmy noticed that the genie often avoids the moment when the conversation starts to get too personal. When asked about emotional matters, for example, about career pressure or relationships between members, the genie tends to answer with a joke or switch the topic to light things. But that's exactly what makes Jimmy even more curious. He said, "He's friendly, but you can feel that he chooses what to share. It's like there's a private world behind the curtain." And indeed, Jin was known to his colleagues as someone who kept privacy very carefully. He can be a real entertainer in public, but is very secretive about his personal life. He is also rarely seen showing sadness or frustration openly. On several occasions, other members such as RM and Jimin have mentioned that Jin is the most mentally strong, but they also admit that strength is often mistaken for openness. Jin himself once said in another interview, "If you cry, it doesn't mean you're weak, but I just prefer to smile even when I'm tired." Jimmy, who is notoriously sensitive to his guests' emotions, considers Jin to be one of the most complex figures in the group. It is not the most expressive, but also not the coldest. He is a figure who knows how to maintain a balance between being a friend and maintaining self-identity. In one of the behind-the-scenes footage, when Jimmy tries to get her to talk casually in the waiting room, the genie answers kindly. But her eyes are always monitoring the surroundings, like someone who is aware of her every move might be noticed. Number 5. RM, the polite genius who knows when to step back. There's something different every time RM sits in Jimmy Fallon's interview chair. He does not rush to answer, does not try to steal attention, and never interrupts anyone's conversation. But precisely from that calm, there is an authority that is immediately felt, like someone who already understands the dynamics of a space before he even speaks. Jimmy, who has interviewed major figures from music and politics for decades, quickly realizes one thing. RM is not just a group leader, he is a mood balancer. He's the kind of person who listens more than he talks. And that's rare, especially in this business, Jimmy once said. And maybe that's why RM took 5th place in the list, from friendliest to coldest. Not because he is cold, but because his warmth comes in a more rational, more measured, and more intellectual form. He is friendly, but not impulsive. He's polite, but knows his limits. In an entertainment world full of spontaneity and excitement, RM stands out precisely for his calm maturity. Jimmy saw him not just as an artist, but as a thinker, someone who always weighed words before they were spoken and calculated consequences before acting. On their first meeting, Jimmy is immediately impressed by RM's fluent English. He became the communication bridge between BTS and the production team. But more than that, RM shows social prowess that young celebrities rarely have. He knows when to translate, when to placate other members, and when to make room for them to shine on their own. He once told his crew, "He's like a leader who leads by silence, by example, not by control." However, behind that calm leader image, Jimmy also felt an aura of distance, not a cold emotional distance, but a distance built from discipline and a sense of responsibility. During interviews, RM would often look down for a moment before answering, as if to ensure that his answers would represent all members fairly. During BTS's weekly Tonight Show session, when Jimmy asked, "Do you ever feel pressure being the spokesperson of the group?" RM replied with a calm smile, "Sometimes I do, but I try to be balanced because that's what leadership means to me." That answer sounded diplomatic, but in Jimmy's eyes, there was a little fatigue tucked behind those words. RM is known as an introspective person, even in a crowd. Jimmy once saw him sitting alone in a corner of the waiting room, staring at the little note he was carrying. Not because he wanted to stay away, but because he always made sure every word that would come out later had meaning. "He's not distant," Jimmy laughs, "he's just deep." But for many, such depth is often mistaken for openness. And that's where the nuance of coldness referred to in this list comes in, not in a negative sense, but because RM prefers not to express emotions in an exaggerated way. On the social side, RM has a style of communication that can be called mindful warmth. He will not hug you with a laugh like J-Hope or throw spontaneous jokes like Jin. But if you talk to him, you will feel fully heard. He looks directly into the eyes of the interlocutor, does not rush to answer, and always ends sentences in a soothing tone. Jimmy admitted, "He makes you feel calm, like you're in a conversation that actually matters." But that soothing warmth also has consequences. It doesn't let anyone get too close too soon. During filming, Jimmy noticed how RM often set the rhythm of the group unnoticed. When the other members are overzealous, RM balances with a gentle tone. When the mood is awkward, he breaks it down with an elegant, light comment. But once the camera is off, RM tends to take a few steps back. It lets other members talk to the crew, joke around, and interact casually. Jimmy noticed that several times, then said, he steps back not because he's shy, but because he knows when his presence is enough. And that's the crux of RM's position on this list. He is not the warmest emotionally, but he is the most stable. People like RM often create a safe space around them, without the need to impose familiarity. But because of their overly conscious, overly responsible nature, they sometimes look like restraint. In a world of high-energy entertainment, people like RM can seem cold, even though he is just trying to maintain a balance between professionalism and authenticity. Number 4. Jimin, the sweet talker with a mysterious edge. When Jimmy Fallon first met Jimin backstage on The Tonight Show, he said he thought to himself, "Is this guy really real?" Because of the way Jimin smiled, lowered his head slightly, and spoke politely as if his every move was designed to appease whoever was nearby. But a few minutes later, something unexpected appeared. Behind that tenderness, Jimmy feels an aura that is difficult to describe. A combination of charm, self-control, and a little mystery. This is what makes Jimin the fourth place, at times sweet talker, times who can charm anyone, but also keep a side that is not easy to reach. Since the beginning of his career with BTS, Jimin is known as a person who radiates warmth. He is often the emotional bridge between the members. If anyone was tense, Jimin would be the first to pat him on the shoulder and say, "It's okay, we can." But interestingly, Jimmy Fallon sees deeper than just that tender image. "There's something about Jimin that feels both inviting and distant," he said. And it's true, Jimin has a unique ability to make people feel close, but at the same time, keep a subtle distance that makes people curious. In the world of American entertainment, Jimmy has met hundreds of stars, from singers, actors, to comedians. Jimin is different. When BTS came to promote the album Times BE*, Jimmy had time to observe how each member interacted. Jimin is always the one who catches the mood the fastest. It knows when to laugh, when to respond, and when to be silent to make room for the other. But even more interesting, he knows times when to stare at the camera and when not to. Each movement is measured, but not rigid, and that's what makes it look effortless. "He knows how to make silence look beautiful," Jimmy once said with a chuckle. Off camera, Jimin is a calming figure. He's not the type to monopolize a conversation. Instead, he listened, really listened. One of the crew of Times, The Tonight Show Times, once told that during a break in filming, Jimin approached one of the lighting staff and said in low English, "You work hard. Thank you." That simple sentence made the whole team smile. Jimmy later added, "He makes kindness look like a form of art." And indeed, if you look at the way Jimin expresses himself, whether through gestures, voice, or the way he speaks, it all feels like an accidental performance. An inherent Times art of empathy, Times that is natural. However, what makes Jimin so complex is the mysterious layer behind that kindness. In each of his tender smiles, there was always a melancholy nuance, as if he kept a story that was not fully shared with the public. Jimmy caught it while BTS was doing the Times Classroom Instruments Times segment. When the rest of the members were laughing, Jimin occasionally looked down and chuckled a little alone, but the look in his eyes told something else. Not sadness, but more like Times introspection asterisk. "He's like that quiet part of a song that you don't notice until it ends," Jimmy said. In another interview, Jimmy mentioned that Jimin has a rare balance. He can be very present times in entertainment moments, but also carries an introspective aura that only true artists usually have. On the one hand, he can dance and laugh on stage with an infectious energy. On the other hand, he could stare at the camera in silence, and the whole world paused for a moment. Not many stars can do both at once. Jimmy Fallon saw Jimin as a representation of what he called dual charm. On the surface, he's warm, funny, and communicative. But in the depths, he is full of control and very aware of himself. He's not just charming, he's intentional, Jimmy laughs. This means that when Jimin speaks softly or holds someone's hand on a variety show, it's not because he's trying to be sweet, but because he really knows how to make people feel appreciated. And that's the difference between times acting nice, times and times being genuinely kind asterisk. But make no mistake, Jimin can also be dangerous in a stage context. Jimmy once said that Jimin has some kind of switch that only activates when the music starts. He's like Clark Kent and Superman in one person, he said with a laugh. While on stage, that whole tenderness turned into intense strength. Her gaze becomes sharp, her gestures precise, and her smile is no longer a sign of friendliness, but rather a hypnotic attraction. Jimmy calls it performance duality. And in the world of showbiz, that is something very rare. Number 3. V, the charmer who keeps you guessing. If there is one BTS member who makes Jimmy Fallon really confused between I'm being interviewed or being tricked with charm, the answer is clear. V. Taehyung isn't just charismatic, he's mysterious, unpredictable, and has the ability to make every moment feel like an unfinished movie scene. Jimmy once said in one off-air interview that talking to V is like playing chess with someone who smiles while hiding their next move. There's an unpredictable aura that always follows the V, something that makes it seem like a classic-era Hollywood star lost in the 21st century. Every time V appeared on The Tonight Show, Jimmy knew the audience at home would be glued. Not because V was trying to steal the show, rather because he wasn't trying at all. When other members laugh out loud or answer quickly, V takes his time, stares, thinks, and gives answers that sometimes sound like poetry, sometimes like a secret code. And somehow it just made everyone speechless, then laugh, then fall in love. It's this side of Taehyung that makes Jimmy place him third, not because he's the warmest, but because he's a rare blend of cold and warm, distance and closeness, real and mystery. In backstage interactions, Jimmy often recounted how V could casually joke for 5 minutes, then suddenly disappear into a corner of the room to photograph the reflection of the lights with his camera, as if another world were talking to him. He feels like a painting, Jimmy once said. It's a simple sentence, but if you know V, you'll understand exactly what it means. There is something in the silent V way that is louder than 1,000 words. And it's not just cool. It's a kind of calmness built from experience, artistry, and mature intuition. In a world of entertainment full of rehearsed smiles and calculated gestures, V brings something more sincere: unpredictability. Jimmy even once teased that V was the only guest who could make the studio feel quiet but full. That is, when V enters the room, you immediately feel a new energy, not because of the volume, but because of the presence. In a talk show world full of entertainment timing, V plays to his own rhythm. He can be late in answering, but somehow his timing is always right. He could give a blank look that made the audience think he was bored, but 5 seconds later, he laughed and changed the atmosphere of the entire room. It's a rare talent, a performance presence that can't be taught. It can only be possessed. Jimmy Fallon said he was amazed by V's ability to stay authentic amid the pressure of becoming a global star. Most people switch on a mode when the cameras start rolling, he said, but Taehyung, he doesn't switch anything. He's just there, effortlessly. Even in small moments, like when BTS plays games at events, V often creates golden moments, unintentionally, whether through his confused look, a strange but funny honest answer, or a serious expression that suddenly bursts into laughter. And behind it all, Jimmy knows. V is not only mysterious on camera, but also introspective in the real world. He observes, feels, and transforms it into art in music, fashion, and the way he walks toward the light without ever being seen looking for it. Jimmy once said, "He's the kind of guy who can turn silence into a scene." And if you look at V among the members of BTS, you realize he often speaks in silence. A small smile, a slow nod, or just a look in the eye that seems to say 1,000 things. That is why V is not cold in the sense of moving away, but cool in the sense of controlling energy. He knows when to heat up the atmosphere and when to let the silence speak. In a world that often forces artists to always look bright, V captivates with calmness. Jimmy calls him the poetic one. And perhaps that is indeed the best definition for V, someone who makes us guess, but never tire of trying to understand. Number 2. Jungkook, the golden one who doesn't always open up. When Jimmy Fallon mentions Jungkook's name on The Tonight Show, his voice usually goes up half an octave, not because of the hype alone, but because he knows who he's talking about. The almost perfect figure, in the eyes of the world, but at the same time, the most unpredictable behind the scenes. He's the kind of guy who walks into a room and suddenly everyone feels like they're in a music video. Jimmy once said with a laugh, "But behind the laughter, there is honesty." Because even though Jungkook is known as the golden maknae, who can sing, dance, draw, exercise, even cut his own videos, Jimmy knows one thing that many people rarely realize. Jungkook is not a person who opens up easily. Since first appearing on The Tonight Show, Jungkook has exuded an incredible professional aura. No exaggerated movements, no contrived expressions. Everything seems natural but controlled. Jimmy put it this way, he's confident without trying to be. And in the American entertainment world, that's a very rare quality. Many young artists feel that they must constantly show themselves. Jungkook is different, he's just being him, and that's precisely where his charm radiates. But if you look deeper, Jungkook rarely really lets others into his personal space. Backstage, Jimmy tried several times to break the ice with his trademark jokes, but Jungkook only chuckled, then nodded politely. Not cold, but there is a natural distance, and the distance is not a wall, but a form of protection. As someone who grew up in the spotlight since adolescence, Jungkook learned that not everyone needs to know everything about him. Jimmy calls it selective openness. Jungkook's way of keeping himself from losing the balance between his personal life and that of a public figure. However, don't get me wrong. When Jungkook decides to actually talk, everyone listens. During one of BTS segments on The Tonight Show, Jimmy asked a light-hearted question about future dreams. While the other members responded with jokes, Jungkook replied with a sentence that made the studio suddenly calm down. "I just want to keep doing what I love without losing who I am." The sentence may sound simple, but it is said with a calm tone and honest eyes, and that is where Jungkook's strength lies. He spoke a little, but every word he said had weight. Jimmy once described Jungkook as the calm energy of BTS. It is not the most picky, nor is it the one that most often seeks attention. But when the cameras started recording, everyone knew this is Jungkook's moment. He went from a quiet man to a performer with incredible intensity. Jimmy calls it a switch you can't predict. Sometimes Jungkook seems like a polite, shy young man, but seconds later he can stare into the camera with a charisma that makes the audience forget to breathe. And according to Jimmy, it wasn't acting, it was a natural transformation born of a passion for art. But beyond all that charisma and ability, Jimmy knows Jungkook is hiding something deeper, an endlessly demanding perfectionist. He heard stories from the crew and producers that Jungkook often re-recorded his vocal parts many times, even for notes that to others already sounded perfect. He's never satisfied with just good, Jimmy laughs. He wants right. And that's the side of Jungkook that's often not seen on screen. Behind her relaxed smile, there are long hours of practice, self-evaluation, and the struggle to stay relevant in an ever-changing world. Jimmy also recalled one moment that made him truly respect Jungkook. When BTS performed on The Tonight Show with the BTS Week format, the entire team was impressed with their professionalism. But the most prominent is Jungkook. He comes early, checks the lighting, tries the microphone himself, even helps position the camera to ensure the best results. When Jimmy asked why he bothered doing that, Jungkook just smiled and said, "Because this is my work, and I love it." It's not a big sentence, but coming out of the mouth of someone who has lived in this world since the age of 15, it feels very deep. However, among all that perfection, Jimmy captures Jungkook's human side, the vulnerability hidden behind the golden image. He has seen how Jungkook sometimes looks away whenever he is overpraised. He's shy about being great, Jimmy laughs. And that, according to him, is the most alluring thing about Jungkook, the ability to remain humble in the midst of great achievements. In an interview, Jimmy said, "He's a superstar who still blushes when you call him one." Number 1. Suga, the quiet storm behind BTS's coolest persona. Of all the BTS members who ever sat in the Tonight Show chair, only one made Jimmy Fallon stop talking longer than usual, and that was Suga. It's not that Suga did anything flashy, quite the opposite, because he hardly does anything. But that silence, according to Jimmy, has an inexplicable gravity. You can feel the room shift when he walks in. Jimmy once said, "He doesn't say much, but when he does, everyone listens." Such is Suga, a man who doesn't need many words to show how great his strength is. To the casual viewer, Suga may seem like a quiet, cold, even slightly introverted figure, but for those who notice it more deeply, there is a storm swirling behind that calm. Jimmy Fallon called it the quiet storm, because Suga's every move, look, and sentence felt full of meaning that was carefully weighed. He's not the type to talk to pass the time. He speaks only when there is something that really needs to be said. And in the world of sound entertainment, the courage to be silent is the greatest form of power. Jimmy and Suga's first meeting took place in an atmosphere full of laughter with the other members. But Jimmy immediately realized something different. As all the members joked and mimicked Jimmy's speaking style, Suga sat casually in the corner, watching. He doesn't stand out, but his eyes are sharp, noticing the rhythm, energy, and direction of the conversation. He observes before he joins, Jimmy laughs, and that's how you know he's smart. Not clumsy, not apathetic, but mindful. Suga is not just physically present, he is mentally present. He analyzes every detail, from the intonation of speech to the dynamics of the group around him. But what really amazed Jimmy was Suga's ability to change the atmosphere with just one comment. In the segment of Try Not to Laugh, When everyone was running out of ideas, Suga suddenly said in a flat tone, "We already lost," when Jin started laughing. That simple sentence made the whole studio burst out laughing. Jimmy realized. Suga's humor doesn't come from hard work, but from timing and honesty. He's like that friend who never jokes, but when he does, it's the best line of the night. But Suga's humorous side is just the surface of something much more complex. Jimmy, who is also a musician and songwriter, felt a deep connection when he heard Suga's work as August D. He once said that listening to songs like The Last or Amygdala feels like reading a diary that shouldn't be opened carelessly. There's a kind of vulnerability in his music that hits you quietly, Jimmy says. He turns pain into precision. And perhaps therein lies the magic of Suga. He doesn't overplay his emotions, but channels them in such a sharp and honest art form. During the interview process, Jimmy also realizes that Suga is not interested in pleasantries. When asked a light-hearted question like, "What's your favorite American food?" Suga replied briefly, "Steak, medium rare." Jimmy laughed, but after that, Suga added a sentence that surprised him. "Because it's simple, but if you get it wrong, you ruin everything." For Jimmy, the line perfectly reflects Suga's personality, pragmatic, honest, and perfectionist. There are no layers of falsehood, only the truth in its calmest form. Behind the scenes, the Tonight Show crew also had the same impression. Suga rarely spoke, but every time he opened his mouth, the atmosphere instantly changed focus. He spoke slowly, but confidently. And maybe that's the reason why Jimmy Fallon put it at #1 on his From Friendliest to Coldest list. Because cold for Jimmy does not mean not warm, but rather controlled. Suga doesn't display warmth in conventional ways like hugs or big laughs. He shows it through the stability, honesty, and security that come from a solid presence. Jimmy once said that in the entertainment world, many stars emit light like fireworks, beautiful, bright, but quickly disappear. Suga is not like that. It is like a small ember that continues to burn consistently without having to attract attention. He's the kind of person who burns quietly but lasts forever. Jimmy laughs. In every interaction, Suga never tries to be the center of attention. But somehow, people actually noticed it. That's the paradox that makes him interesting. The more he tries to be invisible, the greater his aura feels.